do some writing for that medium, if I applied myself, which, and as I said, people were eager to try new things. Commonwealth Edison was bringing in a cooking show or something, the fair was doing some advertising. Whoever wanted to get into and get the feel of it, I never realized that this would be a pioneer event in some later date in my life. If I had, I would have probably, I don't think I would have treated it differently, because, how can you really project that far ahead? I don't know. I'm just very thrilled that to be honored in this way. Unexpected. I'm happy for my mother would have been just tickled. She finally would realize what pictures through the air are. Although she did, we later got a TV set and so forth. I do wish to thank the Academy for this very unexpected and thrilling honor. I love being in the Silver Circle. I want to thank my sisters for coming here, and Lee for accepting the award, Angie for not giggling too much, and Sally for just smiling. And I'll see you later. You can tell me all about it. Thank you.
What a wonderful story. We're delighted to have three of the sisters. Jean Minetz-Downie is with us tonight, here to accept for both Jean and Fran is Jean's sister, Lee Minetz. And we're just so happy that you're here tonight.
Well, thank you. And big guy, I'm going to agree with Walter Jacobson.
Yes.
Good things come in small packages.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to agree with that too.
And what I mean by that, here's my speech.
Whoa.
Jean and Fran are truly honored to be recipients of the award, and they asked me to thank you very, very much.
Whoa, whoa. There's your award. There's your award. One more time. Let me help you down the stairs.
Okay, thank you.
She puts oaks and acorns, doesn't she? Our next honoree, Ruben Cruz. His presenter, longtime friend, Jeff McGrath, former president of the Home Shopping Network, who is now heading his own consulting firm, is program director at Channel 7 in the 1970s. Jeff gave Ruben his start in television, so we welcome our good friend, Jeff McGrath. Jeff.
Well, I'm delighted to be here tonight, but first I have a public service announcement. In about 10 minutes, they'll be serving breakfast, in case you're interested. Tonight I was the recipient of an award myself, and none of you got to share it, and I would like to share it with you for 1 minute before I start in here. This is a dime that Howard Shapiro gave me, and I'm going to treasure this for about as long as I live. Howard, thank you. Thank you. You get it eventually. I've had some wonderful experiences as a result of being in the television business for eons in Chicago, but among them is the pleasure of knowing Ruben Cruz. I'm here tonight because Ruben Cruz taught me the difference between buenos dias, buenas tardes, and buenas noches. Every time I greeted Ruben in the morning, I would say buenas noches, and he would get madder and madder. But in the early days of taping the shows, and I say the early days, those were the 70s, we often had a problem with Ruben on the air and had to edit the soundtrack a lot. Now, I devised a solution to the problem by asking him to substitute the word clarity for his pronunciation of the word focus. You have to think about that for a minute. Many of you may not have experienced the artist in Ruben Cruz. To say the very least, he's a very contemporary artist, a student of the Cubist style, and every Christmas I delight to receive a card from Ruben, a holiday card from Ruben, usually with a rendering of the birth of Christ. I'm not one to criticize an artist. However, it took me several years to get used to a square-shaped Virgin Mary with a triangled head. Whatever. But getting to know Ruben Cruz requires knowing his family. His sisters are very accomplished community leaders. His son has been very involved in the community he's served. But my favorite memory was when Joan and I took a tour of the island of Puerto Rico in the back seat of Ruben's father's car. His father took meticulous care describing every church, monument, town, and forest along the road. Our problem, of course, at the time was the fact that Ruben's father did not speak one word of English, and we did not speak one word of Spanish. So I spent the entire day saying, "I see." If one ever had any doubt, the entire Cruz family and is devoted to serving others. It seems too good. In this day and age, it's almost impossible not to associate a community or political leader without some sort of scandal. If you look hard at Ruben Cruz, you'll find none. This man personifies the concept of true, and I mean true, leadership. Since coming to Chicago, he has gained national, state, and local recognition for his efforts in leadership as one of the hardest working and the most dedicated stewards of Chicago's Hispanic community. Throughout the era of the 70s and 80s, many of Chicago's minorities struggled for a recognition and a place to stand and be counted as a productive part of the greater community. Many of the leaders of the community sought the drama of confrontation and brinkmanship. They believed in the power of media coverage. Reverend Cruz, on the other hand, believed in the power of communication. He began his exposure to television on Channel 5's Everyman, which was produced by the Church Federation of Chicago. However, in the late 60s, I came to be a good friend and colleague when Reverend Cruz came to Channel 7 to produce and host Oiga Amigo, which is our first program, the first program on Channel 7 exclusively dedicated to Spanish issues. Later, he hosted Weekend Edition on WLS, and as a result of his work, he received the governor's citation of the Chicago chapter, this very chapter, of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. In the 70s, believe it or not, he also wrote a column for the Chicago Sun-Times. And then, of course, he later went on to co-host Ayuda on Channel 26 and Esta Semana for many years on Fox 32. Now, if that's not enough dedication, consider Reverend Cruz's other pastimes. The Illinois Arts Council, chairman of the media panel. State of Illinois Spanish-Speaking People Study Commission. Founding member and chairman of ASPIDA, the organization devoted to helping Hispanic students get to college. The Campfire Girls National Growth Committee, board of directors of the Metropolitan Chicago Campfire Girls, chairman of the Media Committee of the Council of Hispanic American Ministers in the United States, member of the Governor of Puerto Rico Advisory on Mainland Puerto Rican Affairs, member of the board of directors of the Free Street Theater, member of the Chicago Community Coordinated Child Care Committee, member of the Board of Higher Education of the Christian Church in the United States and Canada, member of the Board of Directors of the Community Renewal Society, member and chairman of the Communication Commission of the Church Federation of Chicago, appointed by Mayor Richard J. Daley to the Board of Health of the City of Chicago, member of the Board of Directors of the Easter Seal Society, member of the Board of Directors of the Lincoln Park Zoological Society, member of the Board of Directors of the Chicago UNICEF Committee, founding member of the Latin American JCs, member of the Board of Directors of the Chicago Area Boy Scouts Council, advisor to the Secretary of State on Latin American Affairs under the Carter administration, and member of the Board of Directors of Eureka College. I'm exhausted. In case that's not enough, and it's not, Reverend Cruz has held appointments on the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, chairman of the Grant Hospital, the Public Health Trust of Illinois, and he's been a long-term trustee of the Lincoln Academy. Now that alone is a little much. And yes, I called him into my office many times and said, Ruben, I think you should be more involved. In his spare time, Ruben does devote some time to his art, and I understand it's changing from its cubist state into something a little more understandable. I believe that Reverend Cruz, or Ruben as I call him, defines leadership. All he has done for the greater community, his church, his fellow man, has not wavered in the 33 years I've known him. And even in the face of tragedy, the untimely death of his young son and the tragic death of his devoted wife, are losses many of us could not endure. I remember the strength of his faith at a time when most of us would not be able to bear the strain. And Ruben had the power of his conviction and the faith to persevere. He had a vision for his life that few ever realize. I consider it an honor to know Ruben Cruz, and I believe that he has given much more to me than I could have ever given to him. He has taught me the meaning of dedication, principle, duty to your fellow man, and living a truly, and I mean truly, honorable life. Tonight, the Academy has made a wise choice in honoring the Reverend Ruben Cruz because he has done me the exceptional honor of allowing me to introduce him for this award. And I'd like now for the lights to come down and we take a look at this videotape.
Good afternoon and welcome to Weekend Edition. I am Ruben Cruz. Buenos días and welcome to another edition of Esta Semana. ¿Por qué no puedes explicar?
Reverend Ruben Cruz's journey to television was unconventional. As pastor of Chicago's first Spanish Christian church since 1964, he's always been a prominent voice in the Hispanic community. But he is perhaps most well known as one of Chicago's first broadcasters to give the Hispanic community a voice.
Constantemente muchos estudiantes son agolpeados en esas escuelas.
Cruz began his television career in the mid-1960s on WMAQ's Everyman program of the Church Federation of Greater Chicago. In the 70s, he continued to address the needs of the Hispanic community as a producer of the popular Oiga Amiga and host of Weekend Edition on WLS. Teresa Gutierrez, Bob Petty, and Ruben Cruz made a great team, and Teresa has fond memories of their time together.
Edition of Weekend Edition. Teresa and Bob are away on vacation.
Well, Ruben, I certainly wish that I could be with you because I know that this is a very special evening. Unfortunately, I had foot surgery. This is my 6th surgery, and I really have to be off this right foot. But when they asked me to say something about you, I thought, my gosh, of course I want to say something about Ruben and Bob Petty, two of my favorite men. Here was this girl from Gary, Indiana that started in broadcasting, and I had Ruben and Bob Petty show me the ropes. How lucky is that? When I think about you, Ruben, I think of such a special, caring human being. You're a Renaissance man, and some people don't really realize that about you. You're a theologian, University of Chicago, the Art Institute, so you're an accomplished artist, an intellectual, a minister, a television personality, a pioneer. You've done so much, so I think it's great that the Academy is honoring you because you should be honored. I really consider it a blessing to have been a part of your life. Television for you was really not that important. What was important is how you used it. You used it as a tool to help other people. And I think that's what I enjoy the most out of you. The television business sometimes tends to get in the way and people tend to believe their own press. But that's never happened to you because you're truly a loving, caring, genuine human being. So Ruben, congratulations for this evening. You know that I love you, and please give my regards to Bob Petty.
Ruben's drive to use his voice to help others only grew. He wrote a column in Spanish for the Chicago Sun-Times, the first of its kind in an English paper.
Ruben.
In the 80s, he joined forces with WCIU to host Ayuda.
Ruben, congratulations. Your show with us, Ayuda, meant help. And you've always been a reliable pillar of virtue and wisdom and helping people. We are proud that you are getting this well-deserved award. Again, congratulations, Ruben.
Ruben continued his crusade to help the Hispanic community when he teamed up with me, Wanda Wells, on Esta Semana.
Buenos días and welcome to Esta Semana.
Ruben, congratulations on being the first Hispanic Silver Circle honoree. We here at Fox Chicago are very proud of you. And you know what? I haven't had an opportunity to tell you, but just to say thank you so very much for all that you have done for us in the Community Affairs Department. And you've been a perfect fit because your first priority has always been to give back to the community, something that we've always tried to do. Again, Ruben, thank you so very much. Not only do I consider you to be a friend, but I also consider you to be a terrific person for the Hispanic community and for Chicago. Ruben has been recognized many times over for his selfless and tireless efforts on behalf of the Hispanic community. Whether tackling tough issues, interviewing mayors, or even governors, Ruben was thorough and fair, but he still managed to have some fun along the way.
I haven't heard it, so do you think you could hum a few bars for us?
Oh, certainly, Teresa. Cuando la brisa de invierno se cuela por mis ventanitas.
Ruben gave his voice to an often underserved audience. His impact in the Hispanic community is undeniable, and his legacy is honored tonight with a Silver Circle.
Hay muchas personas con las que yo me siento muy, pero que muy agradecido en esta noche. En primer lugar, aquellos que promovieron que yo me ganara este premio, y ellos se encuentran aquí, Ricardo Vento y Marisa Aquiles. Ustedes tienen la culpa de esto. Cuando yo comencé mi carrera en los medios de comunicación aquí en esta ciudad, el idioma que estoy hablando en estos momentos poco se escuchaba en los medios de comunicación. Me recuerdo cuando empecé en el Canal 26, que era el único que transmitía en español. Pero después, con el tiempo, las cosas cambiaron. Y hoy en día hay unas cuantas cadenas que transmiten en español. You think I'm going to continue in Spanish, huh? After what Jeff said about my English, and I won't say some of the other words, I always remember the time when he said, I want you to take some lessons with diction. And I started to take these lessons, attended every week, until one day the person who was teaching me said, you're really coming along with that accent eradication program. I said, what? Went back and talked to Jeff about my cultural aspect in relation to my accent. It's part of me. I'm really very grateful for this city, for the opportunity that I've been able to have, to be able to serve in the communication industry. I have always said that my involvement in television, in the community affairs programs of television, that's what I have done here in the city of Chicago, is an extension of my ministry. I am a pastor first, a minister. As they will mention, I'm the pastor of the First Spanish Christian Church of the city of Chicago. Many people are not aware of that. They know me more because of my involvement in the media. But I am a pastor first, and that's what I'm doing really now that I'm retired from television. I'm serving my community again spiritually, but during these many years I was able to serve my community in the social needs that community has. And I thank God that I've been able to see the many changes that have taken place during the years. I remember when I started My program on Channel 7 was the first one that addressed Oiga Amigo, the needs and concerns of the Spanish community in the English language in this town. I remember when I started that there were very few Hispanic faces on television in the city of Chicago. Today, all of that has changed. Not only have the faces, there are many Hispanic faces in television, not only there are many programs that address the needs of the Hispanic community, and there are about 3 different networks transmitting 24 hours in Spanish in the city of Chicago. For that, I am very grateful, and I'm very grateful to those people that gave me the opportunity to do this. As it was mentioned, I started as in television in Channel 5, co-hosting the program Everyman, and the reason how that came to be, it was because at that time I was the chairman of the Communications Commission of the communication panel of the Church Federation of Greater Chicago. And that's how I got to know Jeff, going to meetings with Channel 5, Channel 2, Channel 7, and discussing what they were supposed to do for the Church Federation. I was able to get to know them. And at that time, our community was started to develop and to growth in this city. And they asked me if I could be able to help them. And I said, well, I have to ask my church board. My church board always have said, as long as that does not interfere with your responsibility here at the church, you can do whatever you want. And I thank them because I always have felt, as I mentioned before, this was an extension of my ministry. I was able to help and bring about the changes, many of the changes that have taken place in our Hispanic community, the elections of many Hispanics today. I have one person here with me tonight, of which I am very happy to see that she's here because I remember her father when he was elected to the state legislature. He was the first Hispanic elected to the state legislature of the state of Illinois, Joseph Berrios. And at that time, he invited me to come over and give the invocation on in the ceremonies for the inauguration of the legislature. And I remember on that occasion doing the same thing that I did here this evening. I started my prayer in Spanish. And all of a sudden, I noticed several people standing up and running back and forth and going around. And afterwards, they came over to me and they said, do you have a copy of your prayer? And I said, no. And they said, we need to because that has to go into the records. And we don't have anyone here who can understand whatever you were saying. This time around, things have changed. 20 years later, his daughter was elected to the same post. And I think, Tony, are you here? No, she left. Oh, okay. And when Tony, now that she was elected, they also invited me to come back. But I was very pleased that on this occasion, there weren't people running back and forth around the place because they do have people there that are bilingual and that do understand Spanish. And I did the same thing. I gave my prayer both in Spanish and in English because truly the way in which you can identify the Hispanic community is through its language, the Spanish language. Again, I'd like to thank all of those that in one way or another were helpful or helped me to carry out my ministry through this medium. People at Channel 26, so it was quite an experience being there to come with my friend Carmelo Melendez, who was the one who asked me to come and to develop Programa Ayuda, a program that really helped and I used as a means to educate that community, to let them know that they had the power to be able to do the things that they have been able to do. And then coming back to English language, again, at Fox Chicago, and have friends like Wanda Wells that was so supportive in the various efforts to bring about information to the broader community in Chicago. Because let me tell you one thing. This past week, I'm certain many of you received the news that the Hispanic community is the largest minority in this country. But you know something? Very sad, we have to say that still the majority community in this country does not know that community. Thank you. I better not forget this.
Thank you, Ruben. It is my honor to introduce this next honoree, the late Bill Heitz, who was both my friend and my teacher. Here to induct him are his two longtime friends, creative producers and partners and friends, Thea Flom and Jack Wilson. Jack, Thea.
I feel truly blessed to have known Bill Heitz. He was one of the best. Whatever Bill did, he did to the fullest. As Warner just said, he was a great teacher. When you worked with him, you learned and you learned and you learned. You learned either about the technical part of our craft or you learned how to deal with people. At some point after every shoot, an actor would always call and say how great it was to work with Bill Heitz. He's the best director I ever worked with, was a common refrain. The best director I ever worked with. Bill was a great listener. He was always counseling people on some of the most difficult of human situations. He'd listen, and he'd listen some more, and he'd give you a small bit of advice, and you felt that he knew just about everything you were talking about. He never admitted he had the answers, but he always seemed to. Bill was a great friend, always there, always interested, always had time, always just Bill. Bill was an avid reader, a terrific writer, excuse me. He was a great father, grandfather, husband, television producer, terrible driver. And all the time, he had a wickedly wonderful sense of humor. When a decision was made after much discussion that Bill really felt was correct, and he was right nearly all the time, he would say with a glint in his eye, "Ah, yes, another victory for good taste." It is indeed my pleasure to stand before you tonight with Thea to honor our friend Bill with the Silver Circle Award. Another victory for good taste.
Thanks, Jack. Now I've got just a few moments to talk about a man I worked with for more than 25 years. As you've just heard from Jack, Bill was a great guy. He was warm, interesting, empathetic, and funny. And Bill loved television. And he firmly believed that making television was important work that always deserved your best efforts, no matter what. To him, the whole point of the work we do is to tell stories creatively, to look for new ways to show ideas. He once said that creativity was merely a matter of connecting the unconnected. He taught me a lot of things about television, but tonight I'm going to talk about just one of the important things I learned from him, and that is to avoid doing 24B. Bill hated 24B. 24B, in case you're wondering, and you certainly are, is not an inside TV term. It's a term Bill used to describe the predictable, the uninspired, the ordinary, and the hackneyed. It's a little hard to define 24B, although you probably know it when you see it. Basically, it's trying to take the easy way out. For example, 24B is resorting to slow motion shots or star filters to create a phony emotion that isn't really there. 24B is editing together an avalanche of quick shots to pounding music to create false excitement when nothing is really happening in your story. 24B is having a deep-voiced, stagey-sounding narrator to conceal the fact that your script is weak. It isn't that Bill never used such things as star filters or slow motion or fast music, but that he never used them cheaply. 24B was the label Bill used for a cheap trick, for stuff that only looks good, but doesn't do anything to advance the story you're telling. Bill taught all of us who worked with him to recognize the frequent temptations to do 24B and to avoid them. And what this tells you about Bill is how much respect he had for viewers and for the programs we make. For his entire career, Bill never stopped looking for new ways to convey ideas and tell stories on television. His inventiveness and creativity were limitless. It was a joy and a privilege to work with him. And as this tape will show, he loved this business from the very start. Take a look.
Okay, Frank, stand by to roll tape. Everybody ready? Roll tape.
This is Bill Heitz, a man in his element.
Drop it, stand by to dissolve the one, and dolly in one.
He loved making TV shows, and he made them for more than 40 years with characteristic zest and style. He began his Chicago TV career in 1962 as a producer-director at WMAQ.
On WMAQ TV.
Right from the beginning, he was producing award-winning documentaries and specials.
William Dolan is real. His name is not. He tells his story tonight on Dateline Chicago.
He took on an elaborate studio production of Hansel and Gretel with typical nonchalance.
On Saturday, we plan to go until about 12 o'clock at night. And during that time, I'd like to get acts 1, 2, and 3 out of the way so we can strike the set for Hansel and Gretel's home and move the witch's house in.
He also captured the legendary Mike Royko in this award-winning TV portrait.
In my opinion, your recent article was the most despicable, malicious, slimy, gutter-snipe propaganda of any that has yet appeared in the Daily News.
Frankly, I didn't think it was that good.
I can't tell from your endorsements of candidates if you're serious or kidding.
That's because I can't tell if the candidates are serious or kidding. So we're even.
Bill spent 5 years making Sorting It Out and winning Emmy after Emmy for the series.
And I saw a gray hawk as we just passed Barrington.
When the Chicago Symphony performs here, there are usually 106 musicians on this stage, and the music director is Sir George Sholto.
In 1975, Bill went to WTTW, where he directed Look at Me, a PBS series for parents about child development, and the early years of soundstage.
Soundstage.
In 1981, he went on his own and founded Bill Heitz Productions, which opened up a new world of shows. It gave Bill, who was a lifelong sports fan, a chance to work with some major stars and to discover that his deep admiration of them remained untarnished.
I've never been one to blow my own horn, and when I do think back, I always think about something that somebody else did.
An inspired teacher, reader, and humanist himself, Bill relished the chance to explore the world of academia. He continued to make programs that focused on current social issues.
Listen, when you get a chance, do you think you can come up to my office so we can discuss that report?
And he brought the innovative women's health ideas of Dr. Christian Northrup to PBS.
Join Dr. Christian Northrup as she looks at what women's health care should be.
What I want to know, doctor, is it me or is it my hormones? You know, like you're over here, your hormones are over here. It doesn't work that way.
And he made over 400 episodes of 3 series for Home and Garden Television.
Welcome to the world of auctions.
Bill Heitz never lost his zest for making television programs or his enthusiastic optimism for what TV could be. He inspired everyone around him. He loved making television shows, and his career is full of accomplishments and awards. To sum it up, he was a master of our medium.
Here to accept for Bill is his wife and best friend, Jane Galloway Heitz.
Thank you to the Academy and to Jack and Thea. We, his family, Amy, Rod, Claire, Jack Henry, Will, and all of our friends, accept this award for Bill because he richly deserves it, because he was a consummate professional and altogether a lovely human being. Thank you.
That he was. Our final member of this year's Silver Circle is Jim Ruddle. Here to induct him is a longtime broadcaster and a guy that sits next to me almost every day. Our political editor at NBC5, Mr. Dick Kay.
Thank you, Warner. And my congratulations to all of you who are Silver Circle inductees, because I was here a couple of years ago myself. I think I set the record for brevity, didn't I? I'm sorry. It was about a half an hour speech. I won't do that tonight. It just really gives me a great honor tonight to present Jim Ruddle. Someone earlier mentioned Fred Silverman, and we know what happened to him. We do. Jim and I know that Fred Silverman went on to produce Super Train, which gave us great lead-ins for Jim's newscasts. 24B. When Jim Ruddle left Channel 5, he told all of his friends that what we do is as impermanent as fog over the lake. His presence here tonight is living proof that he was wrong. He has had an impact on Chicago. For example, his strip search investigation that stopped the devastating degradation of women by the Chicago Police Department is an example of permanency. He changed the law. I got to tell you that Jim Ruddle is never one to tolerate the fluffery of our business that sometimes creeps into our newscast. He has always been a true professional and upheld the ethics of broadcast journalism to the nth degree, sometimes at great personal risk. For example, he did a commentary once about some questionable characters, let's call them mobsters. They didn't like him and they instigated a protest, and the news director told Jim, well, I think it'd be great television if you went downstairs and confronted them. We'll send a camera. And Jim's typical reply was, get the hell out of my way before I knock you out of the way. That's permanent. In fact, Jim Ruddle is the only person I know who was rehired and put back on an anchor desk to restore integrity and credibility for Channel 5 after the disastrous Ron Hunter reign. He has an agile mind. He has a voracious appetite for knowledge, and like the theme that's been running through this ceremony tonight, almost everyone who has been presented and inducted has been described as a tireless, a voracious reader, and he is. There's no question about it. And he has the capacity, the verbal skills to express the core issue of any story succinctly. It's inspired countless others, including myself, to reach for excellence in television. Talking about his reading, his son Blake told me tonight that Jim never gave him a book for Christmas or his birthday that Jim hadn't already read. probably didn't know how impressed I was with one of his commentaries when he started commentary. It was a simple story of a young Native American student, one of Jim's students, who had written an essay remembering the beauty of a starry night as he rode home in a wagon in the West. That had nothing to do with the world of Chicago politics. It had nothing to do with anything in Chicago, and it was just a good story, and I was impressed that Jim Ruddle, who had the power, the capacity, the intelligence to talk about any subject he wanted to talk about on Chicago television, would tell that simple story, turn it into a commentary, and do it well. He loves music. His tastes range from Carlos Gardel, who was a famous tango meister from Argentina, to the great opera tenors of our time. In fact, I remember a night in the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington when we couldn't get him to turn off the damn tape recorder of opera music about 3 in the morning. But that's another story. I remember going to El Criollo with him for La Guitarra, a night of Spanish music. I gave him a guitar when he left, and he learned to play it. His photographic memory is legend. When I first came to Chicago, I did a lot of things, and one of them was produce, and occasionally I produced a show of his. And I was always amazed to see Jim look down at his page before we had teleprompters, spend a few minutes looking over his copy, and look back up into the camera and never miss a beat. I still wonder how he did that. He has a private side. I know he loves solitude. He would take long walks in a preserve near his home. He took long hikes in the wilderness in the east and the west. He has a passion for sailing and once attempted an Atlantic crossing which ended in a hurricane. I know there are a lot of things I could say about Jim, but most of all, Jim Ruddle is my friend. We've argued, we've laughed, we've swapped the same stories over and over again, probably to the chagrin of all of our other friends. We've taken a sailboat through the Erie Canal together, and I dropped a line, and he had to dive into a 46-foot lock to retrieve it. I had a camera with me, but I didn't dare take a picture. And when I asked him to come to Chicago for my Silver Circle presentation and be my presenter, he didn't even ask what it was all about. He said yes, and he came at his own expense, and I was truly honored. His friendship is permanent. And what he has done in his career is permanent. This ceremony recognizes those who have performed exemplary service in and for broadcasting for 25 years. No one, in my opinion, is more deserving than Jim Ruddle. I thought he had much more to contribute when he left this medium early. Broadcasting should bring him back. And I'm honored to present my friend, Jim Ruddle. Here's his story. Jim Ruddle is a native son of Oklahoma. Jim spent his childhood in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, in the shadow of that state's first oil well. The family moved to Tulsa, where at Tulsa Central High School, Isabel Roman, a legendary teacher of numerous radio and television performers, Paul Harvey, Tony Randall, Mary Stewart, and others, encouraged and nurtured Jim's growing love of broadcasting. In high school, Jim helped write and produce a weekly radio show by students on KOME. Right out of high school, he got his first paid broadcast job at KSEK Radio in Pittsburgh, Kansas, then KAKC back in Tulsa. Then came the Korean War, and Jim joined the Coast Guard, serving as a radio man on 2 cutters, including the Iroquois. Not always smooth sailing. After service, Jim enrolled at the University of Tulsa and got a job at KOTV. doing whatever they asked. Early morning news, a vocalist on a daily half-hour music program, helped guests handle rattlesnakes, and he was Zeta on Satellite 6. Hey, the mask hid his identity and the money was good. After college, he left broadcasting and went back to sea with 5 other foolhardy souls who tried an Atlantic crossing on the Owl II. It ended in a hurricane. KOTV rehired Jim, but hearing top 40 radio paid better, Jim, now married, took a job at a 50,000 water just over the Mexican border near Tijuana and moved his family there. Cheap rent, cheap beer, and cheap pay. After several other jobs, Jim became weekend anchor at KOAT-TV in Albuquerque while earning his master's degree. Along the way, he was also building that reservoir of integrity, creativity, and wisdom, which so well defines Jim Ruddle. He became a teacher at the University of South Florida and pursued his Ph.D. There, an old friend and weatherman steered him to WTVT Tampa St. Pete, where he shot, edited, wrote, reported, and anchored.
Now, Pulse News with Jim Ruddle in St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg Mayor Herman Goldner unveiled
a tape of this newscast got Jim Ruddle a job at WGN-TV, where he joined Gary Park for the Park Ruddle Report, Chicago's first anchor team. In 1967, he switched to NBC, teaming with John Palmer as co-anchor on afternoon shows. Here, he went into the record books. 1968 was one of the most eventful years in American history.
1968 was a year of war.
WMAQ-TV did an unimaginable year-end review, 8.5 hours, with Jim Ruddle live at the anchor desk. The Guinness Book of Records recognized it as the longest single-planned documentary up to that time. Jim was always comfortable, even with presidents, and always gracious to fellow reporters. When John Palmer left, Ruddle was a solo anchor and reporter on award-winning documentaries. When the station paired Jane Pauley with Floyd Calber, Ruddle was caught in the middle. He refused a network correspondence job and put his money where his mouth was on public service. He joined WTTW Channel 11, writing and co-anchoring a nightly newscast.
Richard J. Daley, the only mayor for a generation of Chicagoans, died today at 74.
And there were creative, thought-provoking specials, such as Key to the Universe, shot in London.
Today's cosmic detectives, the searchers for the key, call
In
themselves...
1977, when NBC offered again, he took the network correspondence job.
And it now appears it will take either government seizure or an acceptable contract before they do.
Jim Ruddle, NBC News, Ross River Township, Pennsylvania.
A Geiger counter can pick up low-level measurements when held close to the box.
One assignment was a Soviet satellite which fell in radioactive pieces near Great Slave Lake in the Canadian Northwest Territories. It was 48 below, a little more than a snapshot camera could bear, but no one said he was a cameraman. Channel 5 hit rock bottom with anchorman Ron Hunter, and once more, WMAQ-TV turned to Ruddle as main anchor.
Unit 5 went to the 19th District Station at Belmont and Western. And what we
Never one to stay only at his desk, Ruddle also did investigative reporting. In that role, he applied all his skills, sensitivities, and intelligence to a series of reports on the police department's degrading strip searches of women arrested only for routine traffic violations.
And they said, okay, now strip down to your underwear.
This dramatic series changed the law and police regulations, ending routine strip searches. It earned Jim Ruddle and Channel 5 a prestigious George Foster Peabody Award. In succeeding years, management paired Jim with a variety of people, finally replacing him with Max Robinson and agreeing to let Jim do commentaries full-time.
At bottom, of course, is the fact that the future is unknowable, and people who rely too heavily on what admittedly are just educated guesses based on present information just set themselves up for trouble. When the future doesn't happen the way you hoped, you can't put too much blame on the guy who made the fortune cookie. The outcry against gang violence has risen again. It happens every so often.
His commentaries were witty, intelligent, salient, and recognized for excellence.
The winner is Jim Ruddle Commentaries, Jim Ruddle, Channel 5.
Jim Ruddle could never suffer lightly any puffery in news and breaches of ethics. He was president of this TV Academy for 7 years. And after his retirement in 1998, he returned for a special award, and his passion for doing television right was still showing.
We never achieved it when I was president. Nobody ever will achieve total excellence in television broadcasting. The pursuit is there, the query is elusive. We must go after it, and I hope none of you forget that that's really what we should do. There are a lot of people who will sell it out and sell it cheap, but there has to be some integrity in it, and it's up to you, everyone, to say, like Melville, no in thunder when they want to make it trash. So I thank you for this award. I'm very honored to be a member among you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jim Ruddle.
All right. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Warner. I first met these guys years ago. I met Warner when he was only about that tall. And he had a lot of hair. He was the executive director of the Better Boys Foundation, as I recall. And seeing Warner and Ruben, Cruz and Bob Lewandowski, the honors for Ron and Bill Heitz and all of this just reminds me what a wonderful bunch of people we've had here in Chicago television. And I thank all of them, and I thank all of you and anybody I ever worked with, because I learned something from somebody. Sometimes I didn't like you, but I learned something. There were a lot of interesting things that occurred before I got to Chicago. I started in broadcasting, hard to think of this, 53 years ago is when I got my first paycheck. And to go from that miserable start where you had to do everything yourself and everything except sweep the floor, to come up and work in a great city, which I already loved before I got here because I'd been interested in it. I'd lived out at the University of Chicago for a while I did some work up here at the Historical Society and at the university. And I identified with it, but I had no idea I'd ever work here. That little clip of tape you saw that Dick mentioned in the piece that got me to Chicago is part of the luck that I must say has been around me for a long time. I was working in Tampa, St. Petersburg. It was a co-anchor deal. A fellow named Hugh Smith anchored from Tampa. I anchored from St. Petersburg. A guy from Chicago, from WGN, was going on a trip. And the people at the news division at WGN asked him to look around. When you're traveling, if you see anybody we might be interested in, let us know. So he went down, a fellow named Jack Harry, wonderful guy, a wonderful person to work with. Anyway, Jack went down, and he was in the Tampa St. Pete area, and he turned on the news. And Hugh Smith did the 11 o'clock news, and Hugh and I did the 6 o'clock news. Jack only saw Hugh at 11 o'clock. He called back up here and said, there's a fellow down here at WTVT I think you might be interested in. They said, well, we'll have the NBC affiliate tape off the air. So they taped the 6 o'clock. They sent the tape up to GN. Jack Harridge got back to Chicago and said, what did you think? Said, well, we're going to hire Ruddle. He said, who the hell is Ruddle? And Hugh Smith, I have in recent years seen Hugh, and he said he checked with Bruce Dennis, who was then the news director at WGN, and that Bruce confirmed that that's exactly what happened. So it was sheer luck. It could have been anything else. I could have been working in Ottumwa or someplace. GN was a great place to start in Chicago. We had some wonderful experiences there. For instance, one day, some eminent political figure was coming to Chicago and landing at O'Hare, and the film got out of order. And as the copy read, and as the person was reading the copy, talked about the political figure arriving in Chicago, the film was rolling, and it showed Zengakuren dancers in Tokyo snake dancing their way through the streets in protest. Which happens, except in this case, the assistant news director came roaring into the newsroom demanding to know, why didn't somebody tell him there were demonstrators at O'Hare? We had, at 67, the great blizzard of 1967. One of the few days I got off working at WGN, Gary Park and I worked 13 out of 14 nights. That is, one of us got a night off every other week. It was wonderful. And the blizzard allowed me to have a day off because I couldn't get to work. Gary, poor fool, lived close to the station, and so he had to go in. But most of the stations were just operating with whomever they could get, office personnel, directors, whoever, go on the air, and they'd read school closings. Why this happens, I'll never know, because when you get 2 feet of snow, schools are closed, right? But there was one of the reporters, who is, by the way, a Silver Circle honoree of past years, who I was sitting at home that snowbound day watching, and he reported that a kind fellow in Chicago had delivered some supplies to the children at La Rabida, Mr. F.D. Copter. And he said, oh, what? That's fire department copter has delivered the... I don't know. Dick, has anybody else ever told the Hancock building story here? Do you know? Okay, well, if you haven't heard this is the Hancock building is under construction. The skeleton is up about 70 floors. It's just the skeleton. And there are big pieces of plywood up there, 4x8 sheets. There are immense rolls of plastic tarp that they're using. And a high wind comes up one morning and starts blowing this stuff off of the structure down onto Michigan Avenue. And it was very dangerous. The police came there, cordoned off the street, and nobody was allowed to even walk along the sidewalks. Finally, they opened it up a little for some access, and a Channel 5 reporter arriving there much after the incident stopped a fellow who was walking by and said, "Pardon me, sir, what did you see?" The guy says, "Hell, I didn't see anything. I just got here." To which our intrepid reporter replied, "Well, what would you have seen if you had been here?" I think my favorite, oh God, I could go on. There are favorites that go forever. Was an incident that occurred down at the criminal courts building. 2 guys had been in there for some, I don't know what the charge was against them, but they had escaped from their captors in the court. They'd rushed out into the parking lot. They'd kidnapped an old man and forced him to drive them away in his car to some other car, which they stole and got away in. But before they did that, they beat him a little, and he was lying on a gurney at County Hospital with his head swathed like a Sikh. And a reporter shoves a microphone in his face. This poor old guy's lying there looking up. They said, "What happened?" He told them. "Well, did you get a look at the getaway car?" Yes, I did. I saw it clearly. I'll never forget that car. It's burned into my brain. It was a 1956 Plymouth. Or was it a 1961 Chevy? And another, just to keep things rolling. Now, this is a sad story at the outset. But, you know, the thing about television and news is you have to be able to find some sweet in the bitter. And this was a case of a Chicago policeman who had been killed. And that's very sad news, and it was a very big story at the time. But we sent a reporter to his precinct to talk to the watch commander, to get one of these feedbacks on the personality of the individual who had passed away. And the reporter asked the watch commander, "Did the other men like him?" And he said, Oh, Dave, did they like him? Why, when we sent out word for pallbearers, we could have buried a dozen of him. Oh, God. But I could go on, and it's fun, and the business was fun. I enjoyed it. Dick and I were talking one time several years ago, and he said, you know, we would have paid them to let us come to work. And that's, if you've ever seen some of those early contracts, that's almost the way it was. But it was fun. We enjoyed it. We had wonderful friends, wonderful people working in the Chicago industry. Just at Channel 5, there were Ted Smart, who used to report for work dressed in a sharply waistcut coat with a Sam Brown belt and leather puttees, dressed like a Lafayette escadrille pilot from World War I, and report before Harry Mantell at the radio desk saying, "Lieutenant Smart reporting for duty." And Harry would say, "You can't go to City Hall like that." But he did. And we had Charlie Amundsen, who, as a child, removed the labels from cans in his parents' pantry and stuck them back on so that when his father opened up what he thought was pork and beans, went ballistic to find that there was only tomato juice in there. "Not one damn bean," he said. But Charlie was a guy who used to also drive Mantell crazy by sending him a memo. This was years later. We were working in television. Mantell was over in radio. And Amundsen would send him memos saying, "When are you going to bring back the headphones?" And then scrawl some unintelligible initial. And Harry would go crazy running around the station trying to find out who it was he was supposed to return these headphones to. As I say, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people. Bob Petty would appreciate this. He likes to read also. I once had a station manager tell me proudly, boastfully, how he had never read a book. So you would have liked to work for him. I always like to say that I worked with wonderful people, and I didn't work for too many wonderful people, but there were some, and they were outstanding. Bob Lemon was one of the great men I ever knew, and I think what he taught me and what he told me is good for everybody in the news business at any rate, and probably all of television. He told me once, when I came to him and I said, I'd done a story, and it was probably going to get some negative reaction. He said, "Is it true?" I said, "Yes." And then he asked the other question, which is the one I don't think we really pay enough attention to. He said, is it fair? Now, there's a difference between true and fair. And I said, yeah, I think it's fair, too. But it always stuck with me after that there were two parts that you should address when you come in with a story. And one is it true, and is it fair? And if it's both, then go with it. I, again, salute those other fellows here. I remember watching Bob Lewandowski. I told him earlier this evening that Press International was the only program in Chicago that gave us international news. Ruben has toiled long and heartily trying to bring the Hispanic story to Chicago. Bob, of course, you all know as the reporter who was always on the scene and was almost as tall as Warner. Bill Heitz, Ron, I got to talk about Bill for a minute. Bill used to do the noon show, directed. A fellow named Phil Walters, whom many of you know and dearly love, was the producer of the noon show. And in those days, we didn't have satellites and we didn't have microwaves. We sent a truck over to City Hall, to the Daily Center. And it wasn't the Daily Center then. And they would tape things, but you had to bring people out of buildings to come over to be interviewed. You'd go into City Hall, the county building, you'd go to law offices or whatever around the loop and get people to come over there to this fixed location so that they could be interviewed. Then the tape would be carried back to the station and put on the air at noon. No time for editing, nothing. So the show was really a dog to put together. And Phil earned the probably unfair sobriquet of Captain Chaos because the show could frequently go up for grabs. A woman named Lorraine Weiss happened to take over one day for Phil, and everything went wrong. Everything that could possibly go wrong with the show. The sound was on the wrong track, the tape was out of order, or if it was film, I don't even remember if it was back in film days or not. Probably was tape. But at any rate, whatever could go wrong went wrong. And so they've run out of material. And there's 5 minutes to go. And Bill, calm guy, he never lost it. He's sitting there and he's running recruiting PSAs and whatever else is back in the tape room that's ready to go. And finally, they're out of everything. Now, we had a news director named Bill Corley, and his assistant was named Walt Grisham. And Lorraine is fuming. She's going frantic. Bill says, Lorraine, I don't have anywhere to go. And she's stamping up and down and this and that. And finally he says, Lorraine, what do you want me to do? We're in black. And she said, well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to write a memo to Walt Grisham. Bill just stayed in black. There was nothing to do. But the idea of the award is one that I'm truly honored to receive it. I want to thank the Academy. I want to suggest to all of you that the Academy really offers a great deal more than some people think. It's not just luncheons and awards and things like that. It's an opportunity to get to know the other people in the business. I gained so much from my years with the Academy, being able to find people at Channel 7, 26, 44, whatever it was. All of the stations, all of the people who work in this business, you all are related. And, of course, as I have said on many occasions, you're related through the Academy in the search for better television. And I think if you really avail yourselves of the opportunity, you'll not only enjoy it, but you'll find that it helps you in your own careers. Again, I thank the Academy. I thank you. I thank my family. My kids are all here. And Dick and Barbara Bohush and Anna Vassar, who all worked to put that tape together from a pile of junk I dumped on their desks, and I stayed in New York, and they did all the work, even on Sundays. So thanks to them, and thanks to you, and I'll shut up. Good night.
Well, you've probably figured this out, but Warner is back at Channel 5 getting ready for the newscast. Walter is already on the air at Fox News, and we have completed honoring 8 outstanding individuals. I think there's just one order of business left for this evening. If we could pull up the house lights. Pull up the house lights. We have 8 people who are wonderful, outstanding, deserving individuals who joined the Silver Circle this evening. If they could remain in their seats and everybody else stand up, and let's finish the evening by giving them the ovation they deserve. Thank you very much.